Welcome back to Beautiful Work, Beautiful Life. We have an interview for you today, and I am so looking forward to sharing my friend Bunny Young with you. Oh, Bunny and I have a long history. She's a colleague. I met her at networking so many years ago, and we hit it off right away because we have, I'd say, similar backgrounds. Bunny has a master's in social work, and she did some counseling. And she's got a true spirit of an entrepreneur. She is multi-serialed entrepreneur. She's done so many things and had so many companies. And she's a life coach. She is, well, the name of her company is A Better Place. I'll just leave it at that. I mean, in our heart of hearts, we have a very similar mission. Mine is to make the world a more beautiful place for all of us, and Bunny's is to make the world a better place for all of us. So let's see. I wonder what will emerge from our conversation about Bunny's inner work today and her beautiful life. Let's get started and find out what Bunny has to share. Welcome to Beautiful Work, Beautiful Life, Bunny. I have been dying to have you on here. So, hallelujah for today and our recording. Yay.
Oh,
Welcome.
thank you so much. It's all in perfect timing, right?
Always in perfect timing. Always in perfect
This
timing.
is
Well, this
my
is our,
favorite.
yeah, and this is our fourth season, and it's called Tales from a Beautiful Life. And I feel like the timing is so perfect because you probably have, endless tales from the beautiful life that you've been creating for so long. But where I want to start is for you to just share a little bit about your beautiful life. Like, what's the beautiful life that you're living now? And, what does that mean to you to have a beautiful life?
You've been intimately on this journey in the past 6 months. And the aspect that I'm sitting here in my seat, surrounded by crystals, staring out at my horses in my beautiful backyard in California. And 6 months ago, I was, in my beautiful space in Virginia. And this all wasn't a reality. And
Yeah.
so I think when we think about creating that beautiful life, I think oftentimes we start at the bottom of the pyramid. We start at environment and we shift where we are, but we don't shift who we are. And so we show up in that environment very similar.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me over the past, I would say, decade of doing this work and doing this work with myself, not just with clients, that I feel like sitting here in California is that final shift of that pyramid where my identity shifted and my beliefs shifted. And then that started to reflect on the outside to the point that 2 years ago, my husband turned to me while we were driving through Malibu and was like, have you ever thought about moving home? And if you had asked my parents who had moved from California, sold a business, they never planned on returning. And my husband, who was born in Tucson, Arizona, and just is not the California vibe, or at least the SoCal vibe. That was my belief at the time. But by shifting that and shifting this identity, it's like I didn't even speak. I wanted to move back home, but the message was heard. And so also having three beautiful kids, and that's been a journey because of my fertility. How do we want to say that? My fertility journey? I guess just journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I can tell you sitting here today, I think I appreciate it so, so much more having been on the journey and this awareness than if I had just moved to California or, gotten everything that I desired exactly when I desired it. Who I am now has so much more capacity to hold for this.
Yeah, yeah. Will you share a little bit about like some of the inner work for you that was involved in like being the person who easily manifested your family's move out to California? Because I know for those of you listening, I know Bunny, and I if somebody had said to me 2 years ago, "Hey, have you ever thought about moving out to California, Bunny?" I would have been like, "Of course she has. I mean, she's been talking about it ever since she's been here, ever since
Yeah.
I've known her." So it's like I knew it, right? But it wasn't something that you talked a lot about. But
Yeah.
clearly you wanted it deeply,
Apparently, right? Because we're here.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to hear you say that. And one of my really good friends in Richmond, he owns a bunch of auto shops. And I remember he sent me a text and I sent him a photo because I was standing on the beach in Santa Monica. And he said, "Have you moved back yet?" And this was like 3 years ago. And it was just so interesting to me
Yeah.
to hear you say that and hear him say that and
Yeah.
be like, this is something that apparently my soul was speaking.
Mhm.
And so, as far as I think the biggest block, the biggest obstacle, the biggest stepping stone on this path was really trusting myself.
Mhm.
Because a lot of individuals talk about intuition and hearing yourself. And I heard myself over and over and over and over again. I just didn't listen.
Mhm.
And I think that has to come from fully trusting yourself and trusting that your desires are meant for you. That's why you want them. Like we don't live in a universe where you have these desires that you cannot have. It's not my belief. My fundamental belief is that we don't live in a cruel universe like that where I want to move to California, but it's impossible.
Uh,
And I also don't believe that things can be impossible with enough alignment in our lives. And so it hasn't always been that way. And, I went to school to be a therapist. And partially why I went to school to be a therapist is I really wanted to understand the mind. I really wanted to understand our thoughts and mainly around how powerful our thoughts are and why we use that power for mostly inflicting pain on ourselves.
and
Right?
and confusion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Like we keep,
Yeah.
I think we keep ourselves confused so the ego has a job to do.
Yeah, that's part of it. Definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And the lack of clarity about what you want is often it too, and owning it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because of that
Yeah.
either fear
Mhm.
or that lack of trust in
Yeah.
ourselves.
Yeah. I love that you're
And
talking self-trust, Bunny. I feel like this is a really huge topic. And for so many people, it's a really elusive thing to
mhm.
really understand whether or not you trust yourself.
And to be aware that you don't,
Yeah, exactly. Right.
right? I think
That's
that's the first step is
mhm.
really like you said, most people say I'm confused, I don't know, I'm not clear. And beyond, like deeper than that, it is
Mhm.
trusting yourself.
Right.
And for me, there's probably 50 pivotal moments, but a really big, deep pivotal moment was I was sexually assaulted when I was a teenager. And I did all of the therapy, all of the talk therapy. And I thought that was a box that was checked. I thought I was done with it. I thought I was through with it. And it came back up later in life from another trauma that kind of triggered my brain to remember the first trauma and be like, hey, you actually just numbed to it
Right. Right.
and kind of rush through it, almost like recovery, like completing the 12 steps in as quick as amount of time as you can rather than really being a part of the journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when it came back up, I remember first being so frustrated, being like, I did this, I did therapy, I did all of this.
Yeah. But what
And what
about
I
the nervous system? But what about the nervous system?
it's in my cells.
Yeah. Right.
It was in my cells.
Yeah.
And I had this realization, and this is like one of the biggest turning points for me, is that it just because it happened to my body doesn't mean it, like no one can touch my soul. I'm this is my experience currently, is that this skin suit is a rental that I am using
Mhm.
to deliver on my gifts.
Mhm.
And so I can show up every morning with the belief that somebody physically hurt me, sexually hurt me, and took this from me, or I can use that trauma in my cells and move through it and use the story to connect with other beings that are going through any kind of trauma and help them realize their power. And when you go through something like that, when I went through, I'm going to speak in I statements. When I went through something like that, a lot of my self trust was shattered because society and my family, not my parents, but mainly I had an aunt that was like, well, why were you in that situation? How could you let that happen? Right.
Oh
It like
boy.
blaming
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And I remember a conversation that started with, well, if that really happened to you, why didn't you go to the police?
Mm,
And
I
so
know. Trauma upon trauma.
But it was
Yeah.
so beautiful
Yeah.
because it allowed my tree didn't fall, which meant that my roots got to grow deeper. I didn't let somebody else push that tree
Yeah.
over,
Right.
and I didn't fall over. And so I grew these really deep roots. And this is something that happened for me. And this is something that's a part of my journey. It's not my journey. It's not, it is a paragraph in a chapter. It's not even an entire chapter.
Yeah.
And so then using what I knew from going to school to be a therapist to kind of build upon that, right? Because sexual assault happened. Then I went and got my undergraduate, my graduate. And it was when I was getting my graduate that this kind of shift happened. And I was like, this is such an interesting phenomenon in how many of these beliefs that we have wrapped up and we build an identity around it. But if it's true that I can manifest things in my life out of this belief that I shouldn't have been there or I should have fought harder, then I can also choose other beliefs and build an identity from that. And that's really the inner work. It's almost like I see like kind of like a bell curve. Maybe it's a circle, but or a spiral, but to me, I'm seeing a bell curve currently
Mhm.
where you're born into this world and you have your purpose and you have your gifts and you have this special, incredible energy, right? And then we move into like early adulthood and we forget all of this almost.
Right. 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 Yeah. Yeah.
And then in mid adulthood and late adulthood, if we're lucky, we start remembering who the F we are.
Well, yeah. And this is where the inner work, the conscious part of choosing inner work comes because in that loss of consciousness around all of that, if we say your true gifts and your true purpose are related to your soul, deeper than just your ego can serve it, but, it's at a soul level that these gifts are who you are, then you do lose consciousness around that. You're too busy and growing into adulthood. There's so much to do, right? And so we all, I think most of us, unless you're really fortunate, you do lose touch with that. And
Yeah.
then it is your birthright, so to speak, to come back into as soon as you wake up to that, right? Coming back into getting in touch with that so that you can claim it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're lucky, you're surrounded by people who are encouraging and supporting that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think another part of stepping into the inner work and specifically the environment is that can make some people around you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so
Absolutely.
as you shift, coming back to who you truly are, you may notice that the people around you also change.
Mhm.
And
That's one of the most powerful things about inner work is the surprise of that, right? Yeah. Yeah.
it's like I see myself as vibrating at this new frequency. And it's
Mhm.
not even a new frequency, it's a truer frequency, right? Rather than waking up and trying to vibrate to your frequency and my parents' frequency and my client's frequency, my boss's frequency. That's ironic because I'm my boss.
I know. I was
Um,
just gonna say, where's that?
I was trying to make it relevant.
Yeah.
Um, I'm vibrating at my frequency, and that may no longer work for others in our lives, which is such a beautiful choice to
Yeah.
have. And it doesn't make it any less painful when somebody vibrates out of your life because they're no longer at the same frequency.
Mhm.
And I've seen so many people focus on the one person, and this is the ego, the one person that's not vibrating at their frequency in their life and hyper focus on that rather than seeing all of these doors that are opening
Yeah.
because of this new frequency that we're vibrating at. And I think part of that inner work is to trust yourself to know that people and beings and opportunities are in your life for what is it, a season, a reason, or a lifetime?
Hmm.
And to trust that, to
Yeah.
trust that if, there's that saying that like if somebody's meant for you, like let it go, let them go. And I've had people that have come back into my life that initially, when I was going through my first parts of inner work and I didn't quite understand the words and all of this explanation, I've had people that have left my life. And then as I've become more confident in it, have come back and kind of knocked on the door again and been like, I really see what you've done with your life and I want that. And I'm curious if you'll now share it with me. And this is all part of that self-trust that we were talking about,
Yeah.
that deep self-trust to know that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, with who I'm supposed to be, doing what I'm supposed to be doing, which is the beautiful part about recording this podcast with you right now is we've talked about this for years.
Mm-hmm.
And we've sat in your backyard so many times having these incredible conversations. And how aligned is it that I'm sitting here in California living this beautiful life that we've been talking about and that you've been hearing my soul call for years, and how different this conversation would have been had we had it 3 years ago, 4 years ago. I mean, I was thinking about it. I think it's probably a decade that we've been in each other's lives,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is both incredible and amazing.
I know, I know. So, I recorded an introduction before we actually popped on, right, of you and me and our connection together. And you've mentioned some of the stuff, that I mentioned in there. One of the things that I wanted our listeners to have you, hear from you and have you speak into was, your work as a business therapist, right, and an entrepreneur. And I think that it's such a big part of, the role of doing inner work when you call yourself to be those things, right? Your inner stuff, right, comes up, right?
Mhm.
Because if you're going to do a really good job with that, there's so much stuff that needs to get out of the way, and you need to hold space in ways that you never have before, and all kinds of stuff. So I just wanted you to like maybe share I don't know, an example or just like a little bit of the inner work, that was part of your journey to getting there where you could hold that role, as a business therapist, right? Like, what are some of the things you had to get out of the way in order to stand there comfortably, right? And I know it's a
Oh,
lot because so just like one example, because I know, when we talk about spiritual journey, when we talk about inner work, beautiful work, when you choose to be an entrepreneur, it's like an exponential,
oh yeah.
bring it on,
Yeah.
right? It's like here comes the dump truck load of what you have to
Mhm.
do in order to do this well, Yeah.
Yeah, it's you're being called to this much
Yeah.
higher field and plane and purpose.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I'm laughing for two reasons. So I'm a third generation entrepreneur. And
Mm.
the only thing that I grew up saying that I never wanted to be was an entrepreneur.
I know. I have a niece that's the same. I know. And guess what? She's an entrepreneur now.
I
Yeah, I know.
know.
I know.
It's definitely like in my blood. And it's interesting because I went to school, I got, my graduate degree. I did everything that I thought to kind of escape this entrepreneur life. And I always had a side hustle. And I didn't really realize this until my mom pointed it out. But I started a swimming company, like, while I was going to school, and it was just extra cash in a company that I had 72 employees. Um, and sold it. And again, it was the mindset. Like I wasn't identifying as an entrepreneur, so I could justify my way out of all of it.
Yeah.
And so I think that was thing number one, is that I didn't want to identify as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And I had to sit down and really say, like, what is it that I'm afraid of? Or what is it that I'm not identifying with in the definition of entrepreneur?
Mm.
And as the child of entrepreneurs, I had grown up where my mom actually was always physically present, and she always had her cell phone, And
Mm.
so it's like she was always there, but there was a part of me that felt like I was always competing with the company.
Yeah.
And my dad was providing the services. And so money meant he couldn't be home.
Mm.
And so it was important for me to realize those two things, because to your point about inner work, it's like that is not true of being an entrepreneur. It's not true that the only way to make money is to go deliver your services.
Right.
And so that was important for me to figure out how to create a company in which I could make money and support my family and be there for my family. I didn't have to choose. And that's where that yes and philosophy came from.
Yeah.
Of
Which is the
yes, I'm
name
an
of
entrepreneur.
Bunny's podcast, FYI. Just
Yes.
want to slip that in there because that wasn't in the intro.
No, it's very much my like ethos. And that's why we named the podcast that, is because it's like, yes, this is true and this is true. It's not an or not a but. And so, yes, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a very present mom. And so that was thing number one, was really breaking down my definition of entrepreneur that I wanted to step into, and not just everything that I thought entrepreneurism was.
Yeah.
Because by the time that I'd made that definition, I had actually already owned several companies and done it my way. And I think that's like entrepreneurism 101 is
It's almost
doing
like
it
you
your
had
way.
already proved it to yourself. By the time you had to realize it and break it down, you almost
Yeah.
had the proof to
Yeah. Yeah.
to say, "Hey, I'm already doing it."
But how often is our mind the last
I
thing to
know.
catch up?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, like
I
our
know.
mind is less than our conscious thought is less than 5% of
Yeah.
like,
And it's so much the storytelling, right? The way we're telling ourselves the story. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And so, thing number two that I had to wrap my brain around was boxes and labels. And I had to give myself permission to be messy. And I remember getting my license as a therapist. I'd already had some companies and moving into what we're now calling this business therapy. And I paid somebody, I think it was like $6,000 to, which was a lot of money for me to figure out what to put on my business card. I can laugh about this now, but it was like $6,000 to figure out what to put on my business card. And at the end of the day, Laurel, do you know what we put on my business card?
What? Entrepreneur?
My name,
Bunny Young, that's right. That was, and for me, my first business card just said Laurel. It didn't even have my last name.
right? Like but for me, coming
Yeah.
from being a therapist, I needed the title in order to give myself permission
Yeah.
to move into the space. And it was like, what are we going to call it? What are we going to do? And business therapist is not going to stick with me forever. It's just one of those things that it evokes a certain, oh, like people kind of understand. You
Yeah.
couldn't possibly understand, even with business therapists, the magic of what it is to step into a container together. Very similar to, I don't think there's a word for you, Laurel. You know,
Yeah.
we don't have a
Yeah.
word for this,
Right.
and it's an energy. And so business therapist is like maybe 75% of the way to have your mental state wrap around
Yeah.
the expectation of this experience. And trust me, it's going to blow you out of the water beyond your experience to step into your power and be held. And so I think that lesson number one as an entrepreneur is define the box that you want to be as an entrepreneur. Lesson number two of an entrepreneur is to blow the box up.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
That's it in summary,
Create
right?
your
Is
box, then
like
get rid of it.
exactly. I mean, I think the first part of it was defining, because in order to figure out what it is that I didn't want and what I was avoiding and the fears and the beliefs that were holding me back, I had to really sit with what I was making entrepreneur mean.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to stop making it mean something in order to step into my power
Yeah.
and know that, again, this goes back to the self-trust, but know that me doing and showing up for clients and allowing it to be messy is what has allowed it to be incredibly beautiful.
Yeah.
And I look at that, the Defy program that we've had since 2016. And that started as like a 3-month program. It's now a 12-month program. We've added a life operating system and a business operating system. And none of that would have possibly happened if I locked myself in a conference room and tried to figure out what Defy was. It came from years and years and years of taking messy action and showing up and listening to feedback from myself and from my clients and from the world, and knowing that, giving myself that permission to not have it all figured out and do it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I think I might entitle our episode Taking Messy Action. It's like, because it's true, I mean, like it's the essence of really figuring out how to step into your power,
Yeah.
whether it's inner work or the outer, orientation of stuff. It's messy action in the end.
Yeah.
You have to do it. You can't
Yeah.
avoid the messy action.
Well, you think about like every single superhero movie, like as soon as they
Yeah.
get their powers, it looks awkward. They
Yeah.
look like a newborn giraffe,
Right, right.
And
Yeah.
I think that and everybody thinks a newborn giraffe is really cute.
Yeah, that's right.
And so as you step into your power, like, yes, I am a hot mess and I'm extremely successful and I get to define success.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, I want to shift gears. I want to pivot just a little bit because I feel like, where you're in the throes of, motherhood. You just had a baby in the last year. You've got two older daughters. Like you are deep in the throes. Will you speak a little bit to, you know, uh, being in the role of entrepreneur and mom, and maybe a little bit of the inner work that got, brought front and center in order to like manage that. I feel like you do it really well. I know it challenges all moms, right? To work
Mhm.
and then to, be mom. There's a lot of feelings that come up,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So yeah, I'll share a little
Okay.
on, that journey.
Monday, I have a 13-year-old, which, Laurel, doesn't that make you and I's relationship feel all sorts? Because you held Rocky when she was a baby. So it's got to be over 10
No,
years.
anyway, that's right. You're right.
And you've
Yeah.
held Victoria as a baby. She's
Yeah.
7. And then
Yeah.
now we have this
Yeah.
beautiful
Mhm.
6-month-old doing
Oh, I
swimming
got
in
to
your
hold him
pool.
too. That's
Yes.
right.
That's so beautiful. So beautiful.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, with Rocky, I felt like I can look at it now and I was growing up with her.
Mm, mm,
You
yeah.
know, I didn't know what mom meant.
Yeah.
And we were co-creating that
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. Your
And
version
I
of the
was,
mom you want to be, right? Yeah.
and
Birthing that. Yeah. That's great.
and what she desired from me,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like beyond food and nutrition, but what she desired from me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because then you have baby number 2 and you think that, yeah, back to this. Speaking of,
Yeah.
um, so then you have baby number 2 and you,
We have to deal with the background children issue. That's part of the mom. What perfect timing. I mean,
I know, right? So, and
you gotta love it. You
the
gotta
other
love it.
awesome thing is that like she knows how to open the locked door, right? And so now the door is like this much open.
Oh.
And so coming back to this with baby number 2, when I had Victoria, I was like, oh, I got this. I got this figured out because I've had baby number 1. So Victoria was here to teach me that I knew absolutely nothing about like everything that I thought I figured out with Rocky. The lesson there was that pay attention to the person and pay attention to the being
Yeah.
and tune into that. And so it was almost like unlearning all of this harshness. And I use the word harshness to be like bedtime is this time, eating is this time. And it'll really allowed me to move out of my masculine and more into my feminine and going with the flow of motherhood. And she was born in 2017. No, she was, yeah, 17. And that was the time that I stepped away from corporate. 2016, I was on a plane 32 weeks out of the year. And so 2017, I basically stepped away from working with corporations in my company. And I was really present for her. And it brought a lot of grief up for how I did it with Rocky. And I
Oh,
realized that I was parenting Rocky the way that I thought society was supposed to look, in the way that I thought it was supposed to look. And it's that gave me this permission with my third to really just do it fully my way. And it's kind of funny to me to think that there's stories around, oh, it took you 3 times to figure this out. And no, because having a baby doesn't start the clock over per se. I have been able to go back to Rocky and have additional lessons. And so in this role as mother, there's also this collaboration that happens. And this, the number one thing that I need to be successful is to be present.
Yeah.
There's nothing that I need to say or do for these children or my business that means more than me just being present and giving them attention. And I think in 2024, we are so starved for attention and connection and authenticity.
Connection is so big. It's so big because presence requires connection. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
connection requires presence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like true connection that feels fulfilling means
Mm-hmm.
both people are completely present.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a dilemma these days, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, and I've just watched my kids in during this move and their systems kind of coping with this. You know, we moved to a house that's twice the size of the house that they're used to, and where it's a completely different environment than Virginia.
Yeah.
And so I find myself several times a day just holding them
Mm,
and just
yeah.
allowing their nervous systems to integrate with my nervous system because this is home for me.
Right. Right. Right.
And
That's great.
so it's just been this journey of instead of it's almost again like that bell curve of like I have to do all of these things to be a good mom. And then you let it all go and you realize I'm a good mom. And then you just hold them
Yeah.
in I'm a good mom. So that's been my lesson.
I love that you went there because I feel like this is such a great teaching moment, for our listeners, especially for moms that are out there struggling, like with doing the dual role thing, right? And if you are resonating in your being, a true belief, right, that you're a good mom and that you can be present to your children fully while you're with them, right? And you can provide, what they need based on a moment to moment experience, not a plan, but a moment to moment experience, right? If you hold that belief in your nervous system, you're both relaxed and strong, right? There's this strength of self, and the nervous system is really calm. When we think about the idea of being in people's presence energetically, right, and particularly children, right, they are attuning, right, in that hypnotic rhythm kind of experience that Napoleon Hill talks about so strongly, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are attuning to your being. And so, what a brilliant tip for moms, right? To first be in the state, figure out how to be in the state of believing that you're a good mom,
Mm-hmm.
be present, feel the
Mm-hmm.
strength of that, and just be with your child, whether
Yeah.
you're holding them, sitting and talking with them, thinking about them, right? Hold that state so that
Yeah.
you are sending that frequency to them.
Yeah.
Very
And
powerful.
while you're in that state of like it's enough, I'm good enough,
Yeah.
you find this grounded plane to speak back what you're observing and you get to learn more about your kids.
Yeah.
So
And yourself at the same time, which is
yeah,
always so beautiful, right? You strengthen yourself and you learn what's getting in the way if it's not going perfectly, right? You get to
yeah.
see what's coming up for you too. It's so powerful.
So I have a quick tool that a lot of my clients have loved, and I'm going to add a little bit of a tool on top of that. So one is that
That's great.
for my kids, and this has also helped my marriage as well, is this comes from therapy, right? Is that like feedback wheel
Yeah.
of like I'm hearing that you're frustrated, and then they get to correct me,
Right. That's not what I
right?
said.
Exactly. Like
Right.
that's not how
That's
I'm
not how I feel. Yeah.
exactly. And
Yeah.
also that validates them too. In this
Right.
aspect that it's like I don't have to fix it. I'm just validating how you're feeling. And I
Yeah.
think that we don't have enough space for our feelings. And it's
Right.
like Inside Out 2 just came out and it's this big kids movie. And I think it's great because it's helping kids realize that that their feelings are a part of them. They're not all of them. So that was number one. And
Yeah.
number two
Right.
is at dinner, we do three awesomes and one not so awesome.
Mm.
And this is to put more positive out in the world during our dinner times
Yep.
than negative. Because
Mm.
oftentimes when I would say, how was your day? I would get the 15 negative things that happened. And
Mm.
this is just society's tuning fork right now. If
Yeah.
you turn on the news or if you turn on TV shows, there's more like fear and anxiety and
Yeah.
negativity
Yeah.
because that has evokes a certain response. And so we've made a commitment as a family to do three awesomes and one not so awesome.
That's
And
great.
I learn more about my kids, and I hear this from my clients that use it too, that they learn more about their kids from these four things than they do with any other question that they've asked them. And I
Mhm.
also think it's helping recalibrate their nervous systems to more good in the world.
That's great. I love it. I know in our, in our women's groups, we used everybody sharing like a golden nugget or a highlight from the group, right? So you end the group again, bringing your nervous system back to the positive, back to that, focus on the positive.
Yeah.
And we opened with the same thing, what's new and good. It's like we have learned so much to connect on the negative, the fear-based, the difficulties, the challenges, the dramas, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to learn how to speak into the positive
Mm-hmm.
is really the new revolution, that
Yeah.
is needed, right? It's almost like also claiming joy, right?
Yes.
Uh, we are so quick to claim fear and anxiety, but we aren't quick to like sit and claim joy and know what that feeling really, really feels like. So super powerful. And I love that suggestion for parents around how to even naming it is like it's kind of a cool name for today. Three awesomes and one not so awesome.
I know.
So good.
That's the Southern Californian, the awesomes, right?
Awesome. They're awesome. Everything's awesome. Yeah. You're awesome, Bunny. Thank you so much for being here. Oh my gosh. I know it's almost time to wrap. Anything else coming through for you today as we kind of wrap up our conversation that relates to this beautiful work, beautiful life topic that I love to speak into and I know you're so able
Yeah.
to do? Anything else coming through?
What is coming through right now is this capacity to receive your beautiful life.
Mm,
And um, I think about Viktor Frankl's book,
yeah.
and what the message that comes to me from that book, it's Man's Search for Meaning. If you haven't read it, is
It's a great
and
book.
that's it.
And it's very readable. It can be a therapy book, but it's just a person's book to read and you can get so much out of it. So highly recommend. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an extreme example of this.
Yeah.
And in order to go through this beautiful work and have this beautiful life, like that can be anywhere. That's what I got from this book. And I think that's what I want to end and open as an opportunity after you finish listening to this podcast, is that a beautiful life is not a destination. It's a choice now
Mhm.
that you get to have. And that's the benefit of doing the work, is that no matter where I go, I will have a beautiful life because that's what I've chosen and that's who I show up as. And so one of my favorite quotes is from the Lorax. It's from Dr. Seuss, and it says, um, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing's going to get better. It's not. And the one fix, the one addition that I would give to that quote is, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot about you, because it starts with you. And so, as much self work, as much self care, as much self love and self trust as you can give yourself on a daily basis, that's the foundation to receive everything.
Amen. And that means, so it is. Yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you. Thank you. What a great conversation. Bunny and I always have the great conversations, and I am so happy that our listeners got to hear one of them.
This has been
Yay.
such an honor. And I
Um,
love that I got my tea as well. Laurel and I always have the best tea together. So
Absolutely.
I love you. Thank you
I,
for having me on. This is
I
such
love
an
you too,
honor,
Bunny. Thank
such a
you.
beautiful conversation.
And thank you for sharing all that you did because I know anybody who listens to this podcast is going to get so many good golden nuggets from it. And I want to hear what they are out there, people. So let us know. Thank you, Bunny. And off we go for now. Back again for more beautiful work, beautiful life. Bye.